Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Positively Trek. My name is Barry, and as always is the illustrious Mr. Dan Gunther, and we're here to talk to you about the most recent episodes of Star Trek Prodigy. What is on my mind?
Interesting.
You know what? We'll leave that in. We're going to be talking about Lower Decks, definitely, I promise, but we're really excited about some of the news that's happening, and it is a good thing. So all I got to say is we did it, folks.
Yeah, hashtag saved Star Trek Prodigy.
Right? We just yelled at the top of our lungs on every social media app and flew a plane over several different studios and really like gave it the gears. And obviously my lovely co-host and I we didn't do that much other than just sort of murmur and sound annoyed, I think, more than anything. But
our attempt at signal boosting, I guess, but the signal was out there. We added our tiny little chirp of a voice to it.
There you go. Exactly. Our noisy cricket made the day there. So yeah, we've just really tumbled into this opening. So that didn't work out. Isn't the usual way we start, but I had a Freudian slip, I guess you could say. So the cat's out of the bag. We are going to be talking about the 3 latest episodes of Lower Decks, kind of what we think. Pretty much all my predictions were completely wrong, and I'm happy about that. And we can talk about it too. So yeah, other than that, how are things in your neck of the woods, Mr. Dan?
Not too bad. Mostly over the sickness that has hit our household, lingering a little bit in the form of various coughs and that sort of thing. But back to work, missing 4 days out of the first 2 weeks of a new job is not the best foot to start off on. So, making up for lost time there, I hope.
Yeah, welcome to the post-COVID reality where sickness comes in horrifying waves and everyone gets knocked on their arse for a couple of days and got to look after you, right? That's the most important part. And I mean, I actually ended up sick and off for a little while myself. I'm still actually quite stuffed up and still have a cough a month in, so here we go. But I did get a chance actually to do a little bit of binge watching of Star Trek Deep Space Nine again, which is quite nice. Yeah, it was good. It was good. I gave myself 3 hours with Captain Sisko and his ragtag group of misfits in the Dominion War, so that was pretty
very
good.
Cool. So which episodes did you watch, if you don't mind my asking?
I started with the Jem'Hadar, just because I like starting with that one. They're way out in the middle of nowhere.
If the Dominion comes through the wormhole, the first battle would be fought here, and I intend to be ready for them.
Exactly. So, I mean, how do you say no to that one? So obviously we went there. The next one I watched was the ever lovely In the Pale Moonlight. It just, I don't know. I needed comfort food, and in times like this, it's just sort of nice to see someone, though of course maybe not necessarily going about it the best way. At least Sisko is decisive, isn't he? After that, I made myself a plan that I was going to watch the Eddington arc, and I only ended up getting through for the uniform, and I wasn't even in order. So yeah, I was just I looked for my first Eddington movie because we'd been talking about it so recently. So yeah, but I fell asleep. So just as Eddington was doing his first speech on the 3D transporter.
Yeah.
Or not the transporter, the 3D hollow
communicator thing. Yeah.
Hollow communicator that really never gets any play until Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah, it turns out in Deep Space Nine they were dusting off 150-year-old technology.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. I love those little bits of entertaining and fun continuity. Other than that, in the news, it's just been a pretty hard time, I think, on social media altogether. So I think, again, is another time to look at the Star Trek universe for what exactly to do in sticky situations. And just sort of saying at this point, I think we're just hoping that the guns simply fall silent in the Middle East. Just stop shooting, stop bombing, stop it.
Hear, hear.
So that we can actually figure out how to allow for people to coexist. And I think as lovers of the concept of Star Trek Federation, IDIC, infinite diversity and infinite combinations, we need to stand up and say, stop the fighting, right? Completely.
100%.
Now, I think Also, when we talk about the concepts of decolonization, right, as Canadians, we need to look at that ourselves, settler colonialism, all that stuff, and the implications that it has. But at this moment in time, we're heading into genocide territory. And, I think, what is it? Every 15 minutes, one Palestinian child is dying statistically since Saturday. So stop. That's where I'm saying is get your finger off the trigger and let's start talking.
Hear, hear.
So on a much lighter and happier note, and something that I think is worth a little bit of celebrating, and for the Star Trek fans out there who really put their backs into this one, a major pat on that back. We're really happy that Star Trek Prodigy is headed to Netflix. So most people I know still kind of have Netflix for some reason, or at least they haven't canceled their subscriptions. So here is a reason to stay with Netflix for a little while, hey?
Absolutely. It's moved farther up the list of subscriptions of mine now. Like I kind of have this list in my head, and the bottom one sometimes drops away. And Netflix kind of had been on the bottom lately and was kind of toying with the idea of like, do we really? Yep, nope, we need it. Thank you, Netflix. You have earned my continued subscription.
Yeah. For literally this exact precise show and really nothing else. I hate to be a cynic. I'm sure there are other delightful things, but as much as I'm happy that Netflix is taking it, still, everybody mark my words, I will be owning the DVD seasons of season 1 and 2, just in case Netflix decides to take the fickle approach and drop Prodigy at a whim at some point in the future, which apparently it seems every streaming platform is on the cusp of doing at any point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we do know, of course, that season 1 is going to be dropping on Netflix later this year. So before the end of the year, 2023. So I'm going to put this out there to you folks. We've got to play the capitalism game a little bit here, in that I know you all have already seen season 1. And, you're probably waiting eagerly for season 2, which Netflix says will appear on their platform in 2024, next year. Do everyone a favor, do the showrunners a favor, do the hard workers behind that series a favor, and, do the shareholders of Netflix a favor too, and stream that first season. Stream it often, stream it with gusto, because Netflix is going to look at those numbers and they're going to see if this was a good investment or not. And I will definitely be rewatching season 1 on Netflix, even though I have it on Blu-ray. I've seen it already. I will be streaming it again just to kind of give Netflix that little reminder that, hey, this is a good show. It's worth having. It's worth watching. It's worth continuing. We know we'll get season 2. It's a very, very long shot that there might be a season 3 at some point, but let's make that an easy decision for Netflix if they decide to give the producers of the show a bunch of money to give them a third season, because seasons 1 and 2 made them so much money.
I definitely am going to look forward to doing a rewatch of the first season. I mean, I only really watched it through once anyway, so, there's obviously bits I must have missed and stuff like that, and I think we have desired to, maybe return, because I don't think we got through all the characters appropriately either. I think we kind of gave it like a pretty nice sort of satellite view, but I'd love to do a little more in-depth conversations on Star Trek Prodigy itself, and I think this would be a great way to drum up interest and support. And you're right, we do kind of have to play that game a little bit, because the shareholders of any streaming company, of really any large company like that, are going to be extremely fickle and incredibly reactive, right? That's what we've realized, right? And only through extreme pressure will they bend to anything. Look at the Writers and the Actors Guild strikes, right? Like, What was it? They said something like this would mean for some streaming platforms or studios, I can't remember what, that they would be like getting like a 0.73 drop in their income over time to basically cave to the demands of the actors. And it's like, and they're not budging. So yeah, I think, we do this, A, because I think it's just fun. B, it's a good show anyway. And C, so that, they keep this thing on Netflix so that we can watch it. And so our kids can watch it, because that would be really great. I think Star Trek Prodigy is the most accessible Star Trek show for young fans. I know Lower Decks is, kind of along that Rick and Morty sort of fun kind of thing. And I think, some teenagers would probably enjoy it too. But like Prodigy's good if you're 7, right?
Absolutely.
Or if you're 7D, right? It is literally designed for the family to enjoy. So yeah, it's a great show.
For sure. And just as a little addition to this as well, I have noticed kind of a tweet that came from Mike McMahon in recent days that's gotten a lot of traction, kind of talking about these issues with regards to Lower Decks. And this thing with Star Trek Prodigy, it's kind of the best news in Star Trek we've gotten in a while, after a bit of a string of some bad news. You know, the initial cancellation of Prodigy, the cancellation of Discovery after 5 seasons. Now, I love Lower Decks, and I know a lot of Star Trek fans do as well, and Mike McMahon kind of raised, not the alarm, I would say, but a note of concern that these things happen in the television world, and Lower Decks is not immune to it as well. Yeah. So, again, watch often, watch with gusto, let the studio know how much you love that show, stream it, watch it, talk about it. Let's keep these shows going, because yeah, the decisions made by some of these higher ups are concerning, and your favorite show, whatever that show is not immune to it. So be protective of the things you love.
I fully agree. Well, in a wild twist of also sometimes things that you thought are gone just suddenly appear again. What's that, Captain? Off the port bow, I see the white whale. It's the 4th JJ verse movie for some reason. So it's saying here on trekmovie.com, Paramount reportedly working to get Star Trek 4 into pre-production, quote unquote, quickly. Maybe they're getting chased by that weird, crazy ice creature.
Yeah.
Like from 2009 Trek, and like they've got to do this fast because it's screaming and howling at them, coming quickly, and there's no Spock with a torch anywhere to stop it.
Well, I'm I think you've already done a good job of pointing out the irony of that headline. Yeah, let's get to that movie quickly. Good job, guys.
Just
well, man, I mean, this is coming off the heels of the end of the WGA strike. So the writers are back to work, and I think there's pressure for the studios to kind of get things out and get things in production, right? So Star Trek, you'd think, I'm going to say a sentence here that is also ironic. Star Trek's an easy one. Maybe not based on the track record of the last few years when it comes to films, but it is a property that they own that has 13 films, right? So you'd think you can get another one out. And that seems to be kind of where they're putting some of their energy, or at least that's what they're saying. I hope it's true. I also hope they don't rush out any old crap. I hope they take their time with it and make a good film, but we'll see.
Well, yeah. Like, I think that's the other piece of it, is like, are they grasping at something to throw out there, to get just movies out and going again? Like, I guess that's the other piece of this is, since the advent of the internet and, no longer blockbusters and all that sort of stuff, movie revenues used to be based a lot more on their rental and purchase, not actually in the box office. And I think in a lot of ways you wind up with movies that are really trying to tick a lot of boxes and try to get as much revenue as possible. And that's why I find, a lot of movies these days are kind of irrelevant or kind of boring and vapid, right? Is because like they're just a bunch of stuff screaming at you for a while, and then it's kind of over. And I would be, the word quickly, first of all, is ironic because this is now half a decade in the making. And two, quickly is in like, are you guys just going to rattle out some kind of schlock, right? As you were saying. So, I mean, it sounds positive. The cast looks ready to go. At least that's what they're saying. So, I mean, to get Zachary Quinto and Chris Pine and, everyone back together again, I'm maybe a little skeptical about that.
Like Zoe Saldana? She's had a pretty big renaissance in her career.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the Michelle Yeoh syndrome. Like, look at how many great actors have come and gone through Star Trek. Like, just with Zoe Saldana and Michelle Yeoh specifically talking about them, like that's quite the pedigree, right? We should be proud of ourselves. But also, like, when you're that famous and talented, you're not cheap anymore either. Right? So, I mean, I'm wondering and you're also not going to tie yourself to a script that sucks, right? I'm guessing they have shrewd managers who know what to avoid. So, I think this should be done quickly, as in like, soon enough that we can see it, before 5 years elapses again, but also like, don't just throw a bunch of Star Trek at us kind of thing, right? Like,
absolutely.
Let's be measured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree with you more on that. I mean, the J.J. Abrams Trek, the Kelvin Timeline, as they call it, not my favorite part of Star Trek. It's just, that's just needs to be said, but it's not something I hate either. And I think they've proven they can do really interesting, good stuff with those characters. It's not, that setting doesn't necessarily equal not good Trek, right? You can get really good Trek out of that. So just like any part of Star Trek, you can get good and bad Trek out of it. We've witnessed that over the years, right? So
heavens.
Yeah. But yeah, I would love to see something come together again quickly with those quote marks around it, depending on what they mean by that. Absolutely.
That's it, right? Is let's not be silly here, everyone, right? I think is ultimately it. And to say this, Star Trek, JJ Star Trek is what got me back into Trek again.
Absolutely.
So I'll always give them that credit.
Yeah, one of my best Star Trek friends, who I then, after Star Trek 2009, we went on to watch all of Star Trek together. Shout out to one of my best friends, Bobby. She is a huge Star Trek fan now, thanks to that 2009 film. And credit to her, she watched it all, TOS right up through, and enjoyed like 99.99% of it. So
that is brilliant.
Let's make more Star Trek fans, folks.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we can take a little break here and get on to the main topic. Thank you so much for downloading this episode of Positively Trek. We truly do appreciate each and every one of our listeners, and I'd like to especially thank our Patreon supporters. Thank you to our Constitution class supporters, Jim Stoffel, Joyce Marin, and Paul D. Kinnear. If you'd like to become a supporter of Positively Trek and join our crew, please go to patreon.com/positivelytrek. You can get early access to episodes, exclusive content, shoutouts, associate producer credits, ad-free episodes, and more. Again, that's patreon.com/positivelytrek. Thank you all, and live long and prosper. Welcome back, and it's Lower Decks time. And I'm glad it's Lower Decks time. We're going to talk about the latest 3 episodes. They have been entertaining and fun and interesting, and I can usually get dinner made in an episode. They're very short. I do appreciate them. It makes them rewatchable too, because I could just throw like 20 more minutes on, whatever. So I feel like this TV show is going to become very much a bingeable, especially this season. It's been fun. So starting with empathological fallacies. Don't spell that one wrong. I've seen it spelled wrong on like TV guides and in other places everywhere.
And by me several times on my YouTube channel.
Apparently, I tell you.
Empathological fallacies. First of all, I have to say, how much do you love T'Lyn? Like, T'Lyn has just been such a bright star this season, and the episode's about her. How could this fail? Absolutely.
Yeah, I've really, really enjoyed T'Lyn as just sort of like a guest star, like she's coming in. We're getting to know her character a lot more. I feel like actually a lot of work is being done for Vulcans as well, right? Not since T'Pol, I feel, have we really had this sort of an intimate look at sort of the character building of a Vulcan, right? Mm-hmm. I really do appreciate T'Lyn.
Yeah, I made this joke with Brandy earlier. I kind of want to do like a spectrum of Vulcans, and I think like on one end you have just the best people in the universe, and on the other end you have total complete jerks, and like Vulcans can fall anywhere on that spectrum, and like T'Lyn is right on that awesome person side. On the other side of that, we'd throw in like Captain Soval, who challenges Sisko to baseball, and that Vulcan lawyer in Strange New Worlds. Just complete total jerks.
Yeah.
But T'Lyn is
Well,
the exact opposite of that. She's amazing.
Well, I like how T'Lyn's sort of matter-of-fact style about realizing that she's actually the cause of all of this too. She's like, it would appear that blah, 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 like her very matter-of-fact talk, but then you're kind of like, oh, wow, Vulcans really are a deep well, aren't they? Like still waters run deep. And you get this impression of just how actually emotional Vulcans truly are.
Yeah, absolutely. It's totally a misconception that Vulcans are emotionless, right? They have passions that run deeper than human emotions, as we've learned. As Mariner says in this episode, man, Vulcan brains are crazy strong.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to some degree I have been called the Vulcan before, and it comes down to the fact that I use big words as a defense mechanism. And so do Vulcans, which is interesting. And so I typically find the way they sort of use their words, the way they kind of put things together. And I don't have any specific quotes. I was relying on you for that, Dan. But some of the T'Lyn quotes in this episode, I think, are like quotable Trek for a long time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the bleeping is gonna be heavy in this, but I have now seen t-shirts that actually say fully uncensored, Vulcan is a motherfucker.
Yeah.
I love that. By the transitive property, it would seem that I too am Vulcan as a mother.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, or the earlier on when they were on Orion, and she made that comment about like that ripped Orion, and she's like something about him is appealing or whatever.
He is aesthetically pleasing.
There you go. See, this is why I could never actually be a Vulcan, because I can't quote stuff like that, whereas a Vulcan probably would be able to. No, it was a great character piece. Really did give us a lot more to learn about T'Lyn. And I honestly hope, we get to see more of her moving forward. The Betazoids were very much enjoyable. They, I think they do Deanna Troy's portrayal proud, and the twist was wonderful. I was dead positive they were up to no good the whole way through.
Yeah, they set that up nicely, making us think that we're ahead of the episode, right? Like, oh, obviously it's the Betazoids. Come on, why aren't you cluing into this? Oh, wait, never mind. And the kind of riff on the fact that when they played that plot point in Deep Space Nine in Fascination, that Lwaxana Troy's emotions were, affecting all the crew around them, that it was just a total rehash of Sarek doing that to the TNG crew in The Next Generation. Yeah. And the captain basically pointing that out at the end of the episode, like, I can't believe I mistook Vulcan empathic influence with Betazoid empathic influence. Wonderful. Like the meta humor is always so good. And yeah, that was wonderful. Also, Wendy Malick as one of the Betazoids. I don't know if you know her from my references, as have been pointed out to me, are very out of date, but she was in a 90s sitcom called Just Shoot Me as a character called Nina Van Horn.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I'm Googling. She was in Hot in Cleveland.
Right, yes. That's what somebody told me. And I was like, I'm old and out of touch and did not know that.
That was her, yes. She bears a bit of a younger resemblance to the lady who played the mom in Arrested Development to me.
Oh, yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
There's a bit of, she's much younger, but yeah, the similar kind of look.
Yeah. She also played, I can't remember the character's name, but she was Pacha's wife in The Emperor's New Groove, which is like my favorite Disney film of all time. I love that movie.
It is mine as well, and I didn't know that. Well, there you go. I didn't know. I saw the word, like the name Wendy Malick, but I did not make that connection when I was watching the credits. So that's great. What a cool little tidbit. That might get my wife to watch that episode, because she likes Wendy Malick quite a bit, come to think of it.
Nice.
So,
that's awesome. You get to see her hit on Captain Freeman, so that's kind of cool.
There you go. Perfect.
Making her just as uncomfortable as Lwaxana made Jean-Luc, so.
Exactly. Well, I don't know. I think Betazoids would be loads of fun. And I guess like the other bit of that is just sort of the true contrast I find of not an overly emotional species, but a species that very much can read others' emotions quite well, like a Betazoid. And then another species that is so incredibly, disciplined and very specific with their emotions. I wonder have we ever met a Betazoid Vulcan?
I don't think so, but that would be an interesting combination for sure.
If I was to create my own character in Star Trek, I've decided I would be a Betazoid Vulcan.
That's pretty cool. You know, actually, it's reminding me now of Voyager. We had the Betazoid serial killer, basically, Lon Suter. And his interactions with Tuvok, I always found very fascinating, to coin a term. And like their kind of interplay off each other as two telepathic species and with very different approaches to emotion, I thought was interesting. I wouldn't mind watching those again. It's been a long time.
I can't say I've actually seen it, but I know the synopsis. So that's good enough, I suppose, for now.
I want to mention the Romulans lurking on the border of the neutral zone, and when the Cerritos turns around, aww.
And then they like pick another place to go lurk.
Let's go lurk over there.
No, it's good. And also, I mean, like earlier, obviously we met some Romulans who got collected, I guess we can say now, because we're at that point where we know. Thank you, Jeffrey Combs as Agamus. Mm-hmm. But that's for later. We'll get to a few badgies more in a moment. So I guess, you know, some final thoughts on empathological fallacies. I think, again, we're seeing our lieutenant junior grades rising to the occasion again. And I do appreciate the fun little initiation game that poor Boimler has to go through, and Shax's kind of being like, oh, crap, we were just trying to, like, have fun with you, man.
I did really enjoy that as a B-plot. I thought that was good, and actually had, like, a good kind of teachable moment for Boimler as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I guess that's the other thing is, wouldn't it be interesting if we worked in a place where people just kind of wore their emotions on their sleeve all the time and were very not very good at regulating all the time due to, you know, not being able to handle very complex emotions as they were coming in. Oh wait, I do work in a place like that. Anyways, it's a good place and I love it, but I do think, you know, sometimes we do have a lot that is on our mind, and I think a lot of people bring a lot of those things with them places they go without even knowing they're doing it. So I think another kind of to take from our friends at Mission Log, the messages, morals, and meanings that they always say, I think there is something deeper in the meaning of this episode, especially around how we manage and communicate our emotions. And I know that's kind of after school especially, but I think it's a really positive thing, and that's what we're all about here on Positively Trek. For sure.
And I think it's something that Lower Decks is very much about. I think that that message is very much on display here. And I feel like that's a theme that's running through the show quite a bit. You know, we see the Starfleet ship, as wacky as their adventures are, it's a model for how a workplace should be run, with the exception of the captain making everybody lose their buffer time and stuff. There's stumbles along the way, but for the most part, you know, they really do try to model what the ideal treatment of people as human beings should be. And that's a theme that's going to come up again in a different way in another episode we talk about. So, yeah.
Well, I think with that, we can probably move, unless you've got any final thoughts on empathological fallacies.
I don't think so. I think we covered it pretty well. I really enjoyed that one. Again, T'Lyn is just one of my favorite characters. Unfortunately, gets a little sidelined for the next few episodes, but
just not around.
Yeah. Oh, and I want to do that Malcolm Reed puzzle.
Oh, absolutely. That would be amazing.
but specifically with Shax.
Yes. So the next episode is the 6th in the season, 36th overall, Parth Ferengi's Heart Place, which is mealy-mouthed and is a connection, as you've said before, Dan, to Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, a British comedy that I watched when I lived in England and thought was, you know, very surrealist and funny and weird and good. It's got Richard Ayoade in it, who I always really enjoy, and the other guy from What We Do in the Shadows, whose name has suddenly escaped me.
It's Matt Berry, my good lad.
Thank you very much. That was most needed. Absolutely good job, everyone. I'm going back to bed now.
Huge Matt Berry fan and Richard Ayoade fan. So, yeah.
Yeah. Loads of fun. And maybe I need to watch it again. I don't recall, and maybe this is our Positively Trek friends in the chat on Facebook. Maybe you could enlighten us. What did I miss? Brandon Williams wrote it. Apparently he directed it. It was written by Cullen Crawford, who must be a Garth Marenghi's Dark Place fan for some reason. And so far, this is all Cullen has written. And it's fun. It's a nifty take on the Ferengis now that they have kind of moved more into an egalitarian style of Ferengi world. They're not as cutthroat capitalist as they were. I guess you could say they've moved more into a progressive approach. Maybe they're less libertarian and more liberal democratic right now. How did you feel about the portrayal of just sort of Ferenginar and the Ferengi in general in this kind of new paradigm they're in?
I really enjoyed it because I feel like change happens slowly, but it has happened about as fast as it possibly could for the Ferengi. Like Rom, I was really excited to see what Ferenginar under Rom's leadership would look like. And I think it makes sense. You know, we've got these reforms happening. They're chugging along. It's not changing overnight, but you know, Rom's a union man. He's getting them there, and you love to see it. I really enjoyed that, and I'm such a huge Rom fan. I love that character so much, and Lita, like the two of them, they're doing great for Ferenginar as Grand Nagus and First Clerk. So,
I mean, I'll never forget Max Grudanchik at STLV. Him just shortly before he burst into tears saying, "Rom is the man I wish I was."
Yeah.
There's something about Max Grudanchik in his humanity and character that I've always really enjoyed. And I love Chase Masterson is nothing but a class act. And so getting to see them back again in cartoon form has been nothing but fun. I also appreciate the way they kind of play off each other, where Rom is, I guess, you know, kind of playing the fool, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I mean, I was for a brief fleeting second fearful about the characterization of Rom in Lower Decks. I was like, oh no, the writer doesn't get what Rom is and how he is. No, yeah, he does. He gets it. Because what they're doing at this point, what Rom is doing is playing off that initial impression for his own advantage, which is the most Ferengi thing that a Ferengi could do. If you think back to season 1 of Deep Space Nine, Quark mentions to Odo that, his replicators were repaired by Rom. Odo deduces that Quark was lying, and as he says to Quark later, Rom couldn't fix a straw if it were bent. Well, he sure showed them, because over the course of the next few seasons, you find out he's an engineering genius. And
exactly,
I love that. And I mean, I don't necessarily think that was the intention in season 1 when they introduced Quark's idiot brother. He was probably just Quark's idiot brother. And then they said, ooh, you know what we could do with this character? And the rest, as they say, is history. I also want to say, a few weeks ago on this very podcast, I said one of the things I want to see in Lower Decks is something of political import happening that will like influence the rest of the galaxy and stuff. The Ferengi have now applied to join the Federation. I think in a Lower Decks episode. I think that's really, really cool.
That is unprecedented, and something that honestly, you know, the Ferengi are going to have to parse with a currency-less society. However, if you look in Picard later on after this, they definitely are a society that is using currency again. So maybe there's some deeper continuity happening here, or maybe we're grasping at straws. Whatever. Headcanon. This is fun. I think maybe one thing I would say, if I was to speak to Rom, if I got the chance, was, you know, definitely Bar Association, one of my favorite episodes of Deep Space Nine. I think, you know, he learned what he had to about the Union Man, and I think that's also wonderful. But if he continues on his Irish history, he would read the likes of Mr. James Connolly, who would very rightly say that if we just paint it over it and don't change the system radically and completely shift it, we're really just reproducing the exact same thing. So the good part about Rom and Lita is that they are, obviously doing this in the interests of the Ferengi. But who is going to replace Rom after this, right? When Rom dies, there could be a new leader who may go in a negative, or perhaps we could say, backward direction and take Ferenginar back into the chaos that it was once in. So I do think to some degree Rom needs to read some Rosa Luxemburg next, Reform or Revolution. That would be his next big thing, and I'd love to see him lead a revolution against his own leadership. I think that would be a very Rom thing to do.
Oh, totally.
Because he would do it right.
Oh man! But in the meantime, we still have hallmarks of Ferengi society like Pogandar, cop landlords.
Well, I mean, so many shots across like the kind of the neoliberal bow, right? There's a lot of, if you've ever read Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death, I mean, that's basically what happens to Boimler. Right. He has all these ideas about doing all these things, and he just gets caught up in this consumer media that if anyone was feeling seen there, I hope they were, because that was definitely a lot of what Ferenginar is dealing with. We're kind of dealing with now, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm not too proud to admit that I feel like Boimler is representative of those of us, and I'm sure you would be among that group that tends to say like, oh, we tend to be above that sort of thing. Like there's the trashiness and the advertising that doesn't work on us. We're aware of it. And, we don't get caught up in these trashy reality shows because X, Y, and Z, but then something snags you and you get pulled in and you go, good God, because, advertisers have all these psychological tricks that have worked for a century, right? Like they've figured this crap out and they know how to get inside our brains. And they did it to Boimler and they do it to us. And
that's it. Even when you are someone as driven as Boimler, right? Even he can't resist it. And I think that's the other piece of this is, obviously again, I work with young people, and I've been told so much, like, oh, cell phones, kids need to manage their addictions to cell phones, we've got to watch out, they're getting addicted to cell phones. And it's like, who's making them this addictive? It's almost like the people who are causing this problem have names and addresses that we can write letters to and say like, hey, we don't like this. We don't want you to do this. Right. But we're so caught up in that cell phone dependency and the media dependency and stuff like that. So I really do appreciate the amount of kind of self-referential, societally self-referential, I would say, like kind of shots across the bow that we kind of got in this one.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you think of Mariner's kind of turnaround, right? She meets her Ferenginar friend, Quimp. There we are. And she just starts kicking up a stink until he kind of has a sit down with her and he's like, maybe you need to stop self-sabotaging.
I actually really enjoyed this part of the story, and I've seen some discourse online with people saying like, oh, it's a big step back for her character and that sort of thing, but I feel like it makes sense for what she's going through. So she has just recently confronted this idea that she self-sabotages, right? That she shoots herself in the foot when it comes to promotions and that sort of thing. She's now aware of that. She still has those underlying feelings that cause that behavior, but she doesn't know where to direct it now. And before that would be directed against her coworkers, against her superiors. Now she's getting what she wants. She's feeling supported, and it's not sitting well with her because, again, those underlying issues are still at play in her mind, and she doesn't know where to take that frustration and aim it. So I really liked that it's not resolved in this episode, which makes me hopeful that we're going to see some real growth from her in the next little while as to where she's going to be able to direct that energy and maybe put it into a more useful direction rather than getting trashed and starting fights for no reason. And also I will note at the end that Ransom is now aware that she starts fights for no reason. and will probably help her out with that somehow. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much, but I feel like this is to be continued for sure.
And I really feel like we are kind of breaking some tropes in television, and maybe it's a reason that I should be a little fairer to the next episode. But I do like the fact that she's actually like overcoming something, and we have to understand that in real life, when you overcome something, quote unquote, it doesn't mean that you're never going to experience insecurity around that again, or that you might not have some kind of relapse, or that some new issue is going to come along. I think that's the one thing we need to figure out about life and all this sort of stuff. Things aren't a television TV show where it gets resolved in 3 acts and then everyone's happy forever and the credits roll. Life goes on. It has this tendency of doing that. And so I think in regards to seeing how things can be resolved and figured out, that's really important. And I think this is good for Mariner to be called out like this and get this sort of moment of clarity after making a complete arse of herself, right? And just getting a friend being like, you can keep doing this or you can change. And I think that's it, is change is difficult. Learning is hard. It makes you frustrated, and it makes you feel like you're stupid and all these sorts of feelings, but it's how we manage the emotions around growth. Growing isn't easy. And it's good to see our favorite characters not having an easy time growing up, but they're in a much more supportive environment to be able to make these changes. And I think that's the other piece of the Cerritos, is as much as they're all kind of weird, goofy people, they're all kind of themselves, and they're all living their best lives.
Yeah, and I was recently a guest on the Infinite Diversity podcast with Thad and Chrissy, and they had a really good point about Mariner in this episode as well, that in a lot of ways she feels like that friend from high school who, when you go back home, they're still there talking about, catching the winning touchdown at the high school football game in their 40s or whatever, and they've never really moved past that kind of level where they're still partying hard and in that phase. And I don't know if that's totally the idea of what's going on with Mariner, but she is definitely kind of stuck in this rut, in this kind of repeating loop that she needs to find a way to break out of, kind of similar to that person who's relying on past glories and never really moving past that, right? So
I mean, it's a good point, and it is sort of this idea that Mariner's kind of getting herself out of a rut that she's really been in the first 3 full seasons, if you think about it. So good for her. Yeah, I'm glad she has a friend who's strong enough to call her out on her like full on like personal implosion. Yeah, that she had, right?
Absolutely. I loved Quimp in this episode. He was a great friend, I think.
Very matter of fact. I enjoy him.
So a couple other people that need to kind of wake up to their circumstances, I think, a little bit. Tendi and Rutherford in this episode. Oh boy. Those two, like, if they were just best friends for the rest of their life, that would be wonderful. And that would be a great relationship, I think, for them as well. But there is something deeper there that neither of them are willing to admit.
Yeah. And I don't know, I guess like maybe we've all sort of experienced something to that tune with an individual, and there's sort of the one that got away feel about where they're at right now is and I dislike using the term friend zone. It's very misogynistic. But in this respect, I think there are points in time where perhaps there's someone who you may have had that kind of initial, maybe romantic interest in, or a developing romantic interest, where it's just never going to necessarily be viable to be a couple in that way. And there's a number of mitigating circumstances for that to happen. And I think it takes a certain amount of maturity to be okay with that and to try to still pursue a friendship beyond it. It's not easy. And I don't think we're conditioned in our society to be able to see people who would otherwise be attracted to that person that they represent in their inborn nature, kind of thing. Like, if you're attracted to a person and you like them, there's always that question of like, can you just be friends, right? If you find yourself attracted to a person. And I'm going to say unequivocally, yes, you can. It's just, that's where communication needs to be at the most strongest. And I think that's really what this boils down to, is Tendi and Rutherford need to state some intentions with each other, whatever those intentions might be, even if they're not necessarily for sure, because I don't think Rutherford outside of the world of engineering is a terribly decisive individual. And I don't really think Tendi is much either. And so where it counts in their careers and their specialties, absolutely, like they're totally trustworthy. But outside of that, they are infants, absolute emotional infants. And they're going to need to grow up here and decide on what side of the fence they're going to be on with each other.
Absolutely. It's very fun to watch them, though, get that blush that both of them get. You know, why should hearts be the universal symbol for love? It should be, beautiful green eyes. What? I mean, nothing. Oh, come on. Come on, you two. Good Lord. Also, did you happen to catch who plays the Hugcierge Parth in this episode?
No, I haven't, and now I want to know.
Dave Foley of Kids in the Hall.
Oh my God, it is him. I totally recognize that voice now that I think about it.
Yep.
Holy crap, it's Dave Foley.
Dave Foley's in Star Trek now.
Wow.
That makes me so happy.
Oh, good episode. I enjoyed it. So let's go on to our latest episode, A Few Badgeys More. So in this one, we get Badgey again, and I can't really say I enjoyed this one as much. I mean, I really loved Jeffrey Combs. His Agamus was, as usual, enjoyable, and just, I don't know, he's pulling a lot of Wei-Yun, I find, but with a little more bravado, I guess is the best way to put it. I guess, like, for me, as much as we talk about how people change and everything, and we've done this kind of conversation on how, like, yeah, people are actually getting over their crap in this TV show for some reason, and it's kind of interesting to see. I'm a little nonplussed by Peanut Hamper going straight. I gotta just be straight up about that.
Yeah, I get that. I have to say I'm a fan of Peanut Hamper getting an actual redemption after last season's A Mathematically Perfect redemption, where we find out she's exactly the same and just, uses the people around her to get what she wants. I think, and it's a little dissatisfying because the reason she gets redeemed, I guess, is because Starfleet's or the Federation's idea of rehabilitation works, and it's a good one. And her time spent in rehabilitation worked, and she is now a productive member of society who is nice, I guess. So it's a little bit, it feels a little bit anticlimactic, and it kind of drops off a cliff there, and it's a little unsatisfying, but I kind of almost like what they're trying to say through that.
What are they trying to say, Dan?
I guess they're trying to say that in the 24th century, incarcerating someone and rehabilitating them is a good thing, and it works, rather than the prisons that we have nowadays in the 21st century, I guess.
And that's my problem. Like, rub our 21st century noses in it, why don't you? Right? Jeez. Freaking things working out because the society is actually geared towards benefiting as most individuals as possible and has done away with the profit motive, and actually people just work on benefiting themselves.
Ugh, gross.
Like, come on.
Everybody's just a bunch of snowflakes now. Ugh.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's great. I mean, Daystrom Institute does it again. Good job. You got an exocomp to not be sociopathic anymore. That's really actually kind of great. Through rehabilitation.
Yeah, and by extension, kind of rehabilitated Agamus too, or set him on the path to it, I guess. By a model prisoner in Peanut Hamper.
It's a weird B plot, I gotta say.
Yes.
I was expecting more, and I guess that's the other piece of it is what we did get was exhausting. I have to say, like, at the end of it, like, Badgey's, like, just, I mean, obviously he was ripping himself in half in order to stay where he is. And yes, I get the bonk bonk on the head that, like, by being so dogged in our approach and the desires for revenge, or the concept of winning, or the binary logic of, getting something over someone else. And it is a big problem in our society, and we destroy ourselves by doing it. Boy, was I exhausted at the end of it. Like, even Badgey looked kind of exhausted when he finally, like, actualized and became a hyperdimensional being or whatever the heck and met the koala. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I'm not the biggest Badgey fan. I thought he was hilarious when he was first introduced. That episode, by the way, that's the same episode that Ensign Fletcher is in. And so I generally hate that episode, except Badgey's in it and he was funny. So it's this kind of weird thing. But yeah, Badgey's a bit much. The kind of splitting into Goodgy and Logicy.
Logicy.
Was that it? Yeah. I don't know. The Goodgy was a good pun. I'll give them that. I was like,
sure.
Okay. But the fact that Rutherford has now integrated him into his AI at the end of the episode, like, I'm with the rest of the characters. I am backing slowly out of that room and having nothing to do with that.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, I mean, I appreciate the fact that, like, I think it was Boimler who's just like, listen to reason or something, or was it Rutherford? I can't remember. But basically he gives like a very logical argument, and then that's when like Badgey has to rip his logic out. Otherwise he would have just went, oh, you're absolutely right. Never mind, click, clack, clock. And that would have been it. Like, that's almost where it was going for a minute. And I'm like, whoa, is this going to be like just an episode of anticlimax after anticlimax? Like, I don't know. The only time someone has ever been like, hey, this is dumb, you shouldn't do this, was Spider-Man 2, and Dr. Octopus is like, oh yeah, wait a minute, no, I'm totally out of my depth here. That was the only time I ever bought it. And then just finally, like, it's like it gets so incredibly untenable, they can't go any further with the story, that they literally he just ascends into another plane of being, because he just can't possibly, they just skyhooked him right out of it, out of the entire story. So I guess, like,
it's a literal Deus Ex Machina. Literally.
Yeah, and I can totally see the writers and them being like, oh yeah, we did that on purpose. But I'm also like, you guys just played that one like a card in some fancy card game that I can't think of right now. I don't know. It was a fine episode. I mean, we've had a pretty good series so far. It's a good season. I mean, actually, no, we've had a pretty good series so far. So not everything's going to be solid gold. And would I like change the channel or like vomit if I watched this again? No, I mean, I still enjoyed it. It still had a lot of great puns in it. I love the fact the koala is back. Yeah, I mean, overall, fun show. Jeffrey Combs is in it. There's really never anything bad when Jeffrey Combs is around. So anyway.
I mean, I think I enjoyed it more than you did generally. It's my least favorite episode of the season so far, which I think for me personally is more of a comment on the previous episodes than this one. I think the bar has been set extremely high this season. This one doesn't quite meet that bar, but I still really enjoyed it. And it's one that I think benefits, oddly enough, from a rewatch. When you kind of know where things are going, it's a little bit more interesting to kind of examine some of the choices and stuff. So for example, the first time you watch it, Tendi comes across as extremely naive, because we as the audience, I think, are expected to think that, like, based on the evidence of what we've seen Peanut Hamper saying at the start of the episode, obviously the rehabilitation hasn't worked and she's still planning these evil things. And Tendi is just a head in the clouds optimism person who's like, oh, yay, she's gone through her rehabilitation. She's obviously ready to rejoin society now. I'll go speak at her parole hearing. And if you watch that again, she's right the whole time. It's just we don't realize it. She's sitting on the beach playing with sand, just knowing that Peanut Hamper is fine wherever she is. And she's right. And I think that's hilarious. And I kind of really enjoy that. The one thing where I'm like, I don't know, they have Boimler give a line so that it feels better, but they let Agamus reconquer a whole planet. And Boimler is like, yeah, this totally isn't something Starfleet can fix in 10 minutes. Oh, okay, I see what you're doing there. You're making us more okay with this, but the coastal cities fell, according to... How many people died? What is... You just let him do that? Okay, we'll just wave that under the... sweep that under the rug with a line. Okay.
You know, that is a good point. So many other things were happening. I did forget that Agamus basically enslaved an entire planet real quick.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, there was 10 minutes left in the episode and Boimler was like, well, we aren't fixing this, so moving on. You know? Which is interesting because here I'm quibbling over, something going right for a hardened criminal who is no longer a hardened criminal. And, overall kind of everything going pretty well, and people's like good natured opinions on things prove correct. And here I'm fussy about it when I totally ignored the fact that an entire planet got taken over. And that's probably what the writers would tell me.
I don't know. It feels like the writers don't want you to really care about the planet being taken over though either. So
no. But obviously, I mean, I'm guessing that's intentional so that a point like that or something to that tune could be made.
Right.
Right. Is, you Star Trek folk want your bad guys to stay bad. Like imagine if Khan, comes by on the Reliant and is like, you know what, Jim, we got off to a really bad start. Like imagine that.
Yeah. I would say give it another watch if it's got a bad taste in your mouth. And I don't know. It's still my least favorite of the season. So,
but you're right. Least favorite in what is, I don't know. For me, it's like the green Skittle. I'll eat it. It's good. It's fine. It's not my favorite. I'd much rather a red or an orange. I mean, even a purple, but green's fine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's pretty much all I've got to say on the matter. But any predictions moving ahead? I mean, any thoughts on what might be happening? I've got some hopes and some interests. We're coming to the end here, and yeah. How do you feel about that?
Well, yeah, just 3 episodes left in the season, and we've got to wrap up this whole threat, this ship that's been, we thought, blowing all these ships up, but apparently are stealing them and leaving debris as a fake out kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. You called it, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, me and a bunch of other people. That was, yeah, but
no, specifically you, Dan from Positively Trek, called it. We're saying that here. Hashtag Dan was right.
I'm not with him, but but yeah, no, I'm curious to see what, like, so all of these people are presumably still alive and being held or being used for something. What that is, we don't know. I'm not sure. I really feel like I have no kind of idea what this could be. I thought maybe that beam was transporting them somewhere, but I guess they're just tractoring the ships away somewhere for something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I'm loath to make a prediction because I've been pretty wrong so far, which I don't mind. It's fun to be wrong, to be honest, because then you get to learn new stuff. I think moving forward, we're probably going to see the plot, narrow in a lot more in its focus. I could see us getting something big here in the last 3 episodes, and maybe things will kind of tumble towards a conclusion to some degree. Not in a bad way, but I think a lot's going to happen in the next 3 episodes, and I know that's a real out there prediction that the last 3 episodes of a season are going to be really, really intense. But I'm guessing we're going to see some big stuff happen.
Yeah, I think so too, for sure. So definitely looking forward to the finale, and probably the last 2 episodes are going to be a thing like last season. So I hope we see T'Lyn again. I've missed her the last couple episodes.
We'd better see T'Lyn again, and they'd better not murk her. I don't want her dying. Come on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess kind of a spoiler alert here. I did see somebody in an interview say she's in season 5. So.
Oh, perfect. Okay, good. I mean, and that's it. Like what the old concept, Star Trek dead, right?
Yeah, right. Just shoot her in a photon tube to some planet. She'll be fine. She'll be all right.
Yeah.
Was it hard to bring T'Lyn back? Actually, it was super easy. Barely an inconvenience.
Barely an inconvenience. Oh, I love it. Well, we hope everyone is enjoying themselves and is enjoying the trek. And you can always find us on the discussions on Positively Trek. I'm known to poke my head up every once in a while and misrepresent stuff. The other day, my stepdaughter had a plushie around, and every time I went over and had a look at it, I, for the very tiniest moment, thought it was one of those moopsies, and it actually kind of it did sort of make me feel a little off. I can't say I would be terrified, but the concept of the moopsie is kind of scary. It's like the Monty Python bunny, but intergalactic and terrifying. And verbal. It's like a Pokemon from hell.
You're hanging out in the Positively Trek discussion group, seeing some of that
Once,
stuff.
Yep. I poked my head up. I read the stuff, but I don't terribly comment very often. But that's just my nature. But it's nice to see people talking.
Yeah, well, it's kind of basically the only place I've been hanging out online lately too. So
Yeah, it makes
I'll
sense.
see you there, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll see you all there next time. And in the meantime, stay positive.